You'd be homeless without us, Dad smirked, while my brothers stole my food. I said nothing, just moved out in secret and exposed his illegal. You'd be homeless without us. My dad smirked after I caught them illegally opening my mail to demand more rent from my new salary. So I secretly packed my bags, cut off the electricity, internet and subscriptions I was funding, and left them in the dark to discover the massive financial fraud I was about to pin right back on him. Original post. My name is Marcus. I'm 28 years old, and I grew up in a household where love was always treated like a transactional commodity, and I was the only one paying full price. I'm the oldest of 3 children, and from the moment I was old enough to hold a broom, I was treated less like a son and more like an indentured servant whose main purpose was to subsidize the family's comfort. My parents, especially my father, believed in a very specific and twisted philosophy. Respect was something you earned through blood and sweat, but absolute obedience was expected by default. And if you happened to be the firstborn child, that obedience came with a steep interest rate attached. You were expected to set the perfect example, preserve the fragile peace, and keep the entire household together, even when everyone else refused to lift a finger. For most of my childhood, I honestly believed this was simply how the world worked. I thought every parent relentlessly guilt-tripped their kids into scrubbing floors and doing heavy yard work while calling it teaching responsibility. I assumed it was completely normal to start paying rent the moment you turned 17, because, as my dad loved to repeat like a broken record, the real world doesn't hand out free rides. Here's the kicker: we weren't poor. In fact, we were far from it. My dad worked as a senior logistics manager for a major distribution company, earning a very comfortable salary. My mom was a freelance bookkeeper who worked entirely from home and set her own schedule. We lived in a spacious 4-bedroom house in a nice suburban neighborhood. We had a huge, meticulously maintained backyard, 2 late-model SUVs in the driveway, and there was always plenty of money for lavish birthday parties, designer clothes, and expensive dinners at steakhouses. But my parents had this strange obsession with hardening us for the harsh realities of the world. The problem was that this so-called hardening was directed exclusively at me. My younger siblings lived in what felt like a completely different reality. My brother Liam, who's 2 years younger than me, could literally crash his car into a neighbor's brick mailbox while texting, and somehow my parents would twist the story until he became the unfortunate victim of a poorly placed structure. My sister Chloe, who's now 19 and a freshman in college, had a bedroom that looked like an Apple Store showroom. She owned gadgets and electronics I couldn't even dream of affording at her age. Meanwhile, I had to fight an uphill battle just to get a Wi-Fi extender that could reach my bedroom in the unfinished basement, a damp, concrete-walled dungeon that I paid exactly $500 a month to live in. I started working the moment it was legally allowed. At 15, I landed a grueling part-time job at a large supermarket chain, spending hours on my feet bagging groceries, collecting shopping carts in freezing snow, and cleaning up massive spills in the aisles. Eventually, I moved on to a warehouse job, loading heavy pallets during the night shift while trying to drag myself through the last years of high school. My parents made their position absolutely clear. If I wanted a vehicle, gas money, car insurance, or anything beyond the absolute basics of tap water and shelter, it was entirely my responsibility. When I finally earned my driver's license, I emptied my modest savings account to buy a battered 2004 Honda Civic that rattled violently whenever it went over 60 miles per hour. The first time I pulled that miserable car into the driveway, my dad stood on the porch, folded his arms, smirked and said, "Looks like you're finally learning how the real world works." At the time, my desperate, validation-starved teenage brain believed he was expressing pride. Looking back now with the clarity that comes from adulthood, I realize he simply enjoyed watching me struggle. It reinforced his rigid belief that the world was a brutal meat grinder and that kids needed to be thrown into it as early as possible. After graduating high school, the idea of going straight to a 4-year university was never even an option. I didn't have the money, and my parents weren't willing to contribute a single dollar. "If you want a fancy college degree," my dad lectured me over dinner one night, "you go out and get a job that pays for tuition, or you take out loans and drown in them like everyone else. But you're absolutely not living in this house for free while you figure yourself out playing beer pong." So I didn't go to college. Instead, I worked an exhausting cycle of warehouse shifts, late-night delivery jobs, and weekend retail work, taking any job I could find just to keep handing over my $500 rent on the first of every month, while slowly scraping together a small savings cushion. During the exhausting hours between shifts, I threw myself into earning IT certifications online. I taught myself advanced networking, server administration, cloud architecture, and the fundamentals of enterprise cybersecurity. It was a brutal, sleep-deprived way to live, especially while working 40 to 50 hours a week doing physically demanding labor. But I kept pushing forward and made it happen. By the time I turned 25, all of that relentless effort finally paid off. I landed an excellent full-time, fully remote position providing high-level technical support and managing network infrastructure for a rapidly growing mid-sized logistics software company. It wasn't quite a six-figure salary yet, but it was incredibly stable, came with full benefits, and most importantly, it was an accomplishment that belonged entirely to me. For the first time, I finally had a small amount of breathing room in my life. I was still living in the damp basement, still paying my rent on time without fail, and still putting up with passive-aggressive remarks every time I had to miss a Sunday family dinner because I was tied up handling an emergency server maintenance call. But the constant fear of poverty had finally faded. I even started browsing apartment listings, imagining a quiet place of my own, and maybe enrolling in night classes to finally earn that bachelor's degree. Then the global pandemic turned the entire world upside down. Almost overnight, the dynamic inside the house completely changed. Liam, who had been casually working as a bartender downtown, lost his job when the restaurant shut down. He immediately packed up his apartment and moved back into his old, spacious upstairs bedroom. Naturally, my parents, who had spent my entire life insisting I pay rent because the world owes nobody a free ride, suddenly decided Liam didn't need to contribute a single cent. "He's going through an incredibly stressful transition right now," my mom said gently, patting him on the shoulder. "This is a global crisis. It's simply not the time to add financial pressure to his plate." Meanwhile, Chloe, whose college campus had closed, also moved back home to attend classes online. She completely flipped her schedule, sleeping until 2 in the afternoon before blasting obnoxious TikToks and reality TV shows at full volume through the thin floorboards directly above my basement workspace, well into the early hours of the morning. Through all of that chaos, I kept my head down. I continued working my demanding remote job, kept paying my $500 rent without missing a payment, kept buying most of the household groceries, and kept getting relentlessly guilt-tripped whenever I politely asked for just 10 minutes of quiet so I could lead an important Zoom meeting with my company's executives. It honestly felt like I was a paying guest in a terrible hotel that I was secretly financing out of my own pocket. The only difference was that the management openly disliked me while the other guests enjoyed complimentary room service. Things got even worse when Liam started making snide, degrading remarks about my career. "Must be nice to just sit around in your pajamas all day," he'd sneer from the kitchen island while casually drinking the expensive cold brew coffee I had bought with my own money. Or he'd say, "Some of us actually do real physical labor, Marcus. We don't just sit in a dark basement clicking a mouse and pretending it's hard work." My dad would laugh from his recliner, treating Liam's blatant disrespect like it was some hilarious inside joke. "Your brother isn't entirely wrong, Marcus," my dad said one evening. "If the power grid fails, what exactly are you going to do? You're not exactly an essential worker, are you?" I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. I wanted to rattle off every bill I was paying, every grocery trip I covered, every broken laptop and shattered phone I had fixed for them. Instead, I bit my tongue, gave a blank nod, and retreated to the basement. The absolute breaking point came on a humid Tuesday night. I had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift. The company's primary servers had crashed, we were fighting off a sophisticated phishing attack, and 3 of my key teammates were out sick. My brain felt like it had been run through a blender. All I wanted was to go upstairs, cook the carefully prepared chicken and rice meal I had made the night before, and stare mindlessly at a screen until I fell asleep. But when I dragged myself upstairs and opened the refrigerator, my jaw dropped. Half of the groceries I had bought just 2 days earlier were completely gone. My expensive protein shakes, my carefully portioned chicken breasts, my specialized pre-workout meals, every bit of it had disappeared. I slowly turned around and looked into the living room. There was Liam, sprawled across the sofa shirtless, absent-mindedly playing a video game while loudly burping up the unmistakable smell of my garlic herb chicken. "You're welcome," he muttered, not even bothering to take his eyes off the television. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my heart from pounding out of my chest. I walked over and calmly asked why he constantly felt entitled to eat my expensive groceries, when he didn't contribute a single dollar toward the household expenses. He simply paused his game, leaned back, and laughed right in my face. Bro, chill out. What's mine is yours, right? That's what family is for. Stop being such a tightwad. That night, I brought the issue up with my parents at the dinner table. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't making accusations. I simply asked as calmly as I could whether we could establish a few basic boundaries around the house. I suggested labeling our food or maybe setting up a shared grocery budget, just something to keep things organized. That's when my dad slammed his heavy fist onto the wooden dining table so hard that the silverware rattled. "You are acting like a damn ungrateful guest in your own home," he snapped, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "You think you're somehow better than your brother just because you managed to get some cushy desk job and print out a little IT certificate. Let me remind you of reality, Marcus. You would be completely homeless without us. You live in this house because your mother and I generously allow you to. Don't you ever forget that." I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who silently stared down at her plate, refusing to step in. Then I looked at Liam, who was struggling to hide a smug grin. I didn't say a single word. I simply stood up, walked downstairs to the basement, closed my door, and sat on the edge of my mattress for a very, very long time. Something deep inside my chest shifted that night. It felt completely different from every argument we'd had before. It wasn't the first time my dad had used the "you'd be homeless without us" line to assert his authority. But for some reason this time those words didn't sting. They didn't make me feel small. They didn't make me feel inadequate. They no longer felt like a reflection of my supposed failures. Instead, they brought complete clarity. That was the exact moment I accepted that I wasn't going to stay in that house much longer. But I also made a silent promise to myself. If I was going to leave, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. And I definitely wasn't going to keep secretly funding their comfortable, oblivious lives while they treated me like a piece of garbage stuck to the bottom of their shoes. Update 1. The meticulous planning started the very next morning. I didn't throw a duffel bag together and storm out in a fit of rage. That would have been far too easy for them to dismiss as nothing more than a childish tantrum. I needed everything to be executed flawlessly. When I sat down at my desk and honestly audited my life, the sheer extent of my financial entanglement with my family made my stomach turn. My name was tied to far more than I had realized. The high-speed fiber internet that the entire family depended on was solely under my name and charged to my credit card. The monthly electricity and gas bills were technically split through the online portal, but my card was the only one enrolled in autopay, meaning I had been covering the household's enormous energy bills for the past 3 years. The entire collection of streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, Spotify Premium, and Amazon Prime, were all registered under my email address and billed to my accounts. Somewhere along the way, without any formal discussion, I had quietly become the foundational load-bearing pillar supporting the household's entire financial and logistical structure. And the most unbelievable part was that they genuinely believed they were the ones supporting me. The depth of that delusion was put on full display later that week. I woke up to my sister Chloe stomping loudly through the upstairs hallway. Apparently she couldn't find her expensive AirPods. Before I'd even poured my morning coffee, she marched to the top of the basement stairs and launched into a full-blown interrogation. "Did you steal them?" she demanded, crossing her arms and glaring down at me as though I were a convicted thief. "Why would I steal your headphones, Chloe? I have my own," I replied, completely exhausted. "Because I borrowed your Bluetooth speaker last month and accidentally broke it, and you got mad. So obviously you took my AirPods as revenge." I just stared at her. That was the level of logic I was dealing with. She had wronged me, yet somehow, in her mind, I was the villain plotting petty revenge. I shook my head, told her to ask Liam, and walked away. Later that same afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a Venmo request from my mother. The amount was $55.20, accompanied by a cold little note: household groceries and cleaning supplies. There had been no prior discussion, no explanation, just a digital demand for my money. The best part of the entire ridiculous request was that I had literally done a massive grocery run just 3 days earlier, spending $95 of my own hard-earned money on essentials: eggs, milk, chicken, toilet paper, laundry detergent, the kind of things nobody ever thanked me for. And the same things I watched disappear into Liam's stomach at record speed. I hit the decline button without a second thought. 30 minutes later, my phone lit up with a text message. Mom, did you decline the payment request on purpose? Me, yes, Mom. Mom, that is incredibly selfish, Marcus. We are a family. We all have to contribute to this household. Me, I do contribute. I just bought $95 worth of groceries on Monday. Mom, that was your personal choice? This request is for the shared items I purchased. You need to pay your fair share. Me, I didn't ask for any of those items and nobody ever offers to split the cost of the food I buy that Liam eats. I'm not paying it. She never responded. But the atmosphere at dinner that evening was absolutely toxic. The air felt heavy and ice cold. My mother refused to even look in my direction. My father kept aggressively clearing his throat every few minutes, his jaw clenched so tightly it practically vibrated with the effort of holding back another outburst while trying to maintain his intimidating silence. Chloe seemed completely oblivious to the tension, casually taking pictures of her mashed potatoes for Instagram, carefully curating her fake aesthetic life. Then Liam, always eager to stir the pot, stepped into his favorite role as the provocateur. So, he said casually while aggressively stabbing a piece of chicken with his fork, I heard you refusing to pay Mom back for the groceries. I kept my eyes on my plate and didn't answer. Kind of a pathetic low blow considering she literally gave birth to you and raised you, Liam continued, grinning over the rim of his water glass. I remained completely silent, methodically chewing my food. Marcus, my dad barked, his voice cracking through the room like a whip, answer your brother when he speaks to you. I am not answering anyone at this table. This is dinner, not a legal deposition, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. You are sitting under our roof, my dad exploded, slamming his hand on the table once again. When we ask you a question, you answer it. I slowly wiped my mouth with a napkin, stood up from the table, and looked him directly in the eyes. Then maybe I won't be sitting under your roof much longer. My mom finally broke her silence, letting out a harsh, mocking laugh. Oh, please, where exactly are you going to go, Marcus? You think you're actually ready to survive out in the real world on your own? Everything you have right now is because of us. Because of us. Those 3 words echoed through my mind. They genuinely believed that my grueling IT job, my late-night study sessions, and my carefully built savings account had nothing to do with my own effort. In their twisted version of reality, I wasn't someone who had earned his success. I was just a charity case who had been handed a scholarship to life, and they were the generous, long-suffering benefactors. I didn't say another word. I turned my back on them and walked downstairs to the basement. That night, I opened my financial spreadsheets and got to work. I analyzed my bank accounts, calculated exactly how much I would need to secure a decent apartment, and began rapidly searching rental listings on the opposite side of the city. I quietly called a few close friends to ask for recommendations on reliable property management companies. I created a massive, comprehensive checklist, transfer the Wi-Fi, remove my credit cards from every household autopay, pack all of my electronics, secure a moving truck. I knew it would take a full 2 weeks to carefully untangle my financial and digital footprint from that house, but I was determined to execute every step flawlessly. I wanted to leave cleanly, quietly, without giving them the satisfaction of one final screaming match, while making absolutely sure the bridge was completely burned behind me. Over the following week, I quietly began the invisible extraction process. I contacted the fiber internet provider, informed them that I was relocating, and scheduled a hard cutoff date for the service exactly 2 weeks from that Monday. Perfect. I logged into the electricity and gas account portals, completely removed my primary credit card information, deleted my user profile, and allowed the accounts to revert back to the property's physical address. Eventually, my dad would receive a massive paper bill in the mail. He could figure it out. Meanwhile, life upstairs continued in blissful, ignorant entitlement. Liam kept helping himself to my remaining groceries. Chloe permanently borrowed my backup power banks. My mom sent me yet another Venmo request, this time for $28.50 to cover cleaning supplies. I left it sitting in the pending folder and ignored it completely. Then came the catastrophic breaking point. It was a Thursday evening. I'd been trapped in back-to-back virtual meetings since 8 that morning. When I finally came upstairs from the basement to grab a glass of water, I noticed something immediately felt off. Laughter was coming from the kitchen. It wasn't ordinary laughter. It was that strange conspiratorial kind of fake family joy that only ever appeared when they were collectively gossiping about someone else's misfortune. My dad sat at the head of the kitchen island, grinning from ear to ear. Liam leaned against the refrigerator, scrolling through his phone while chuckling. My mom wore an unmistakably smug, satisfied smile. Chloe was whispering excitedly. The moment I walked into the kitchen, the laughter stopped. Then I saw it. Lying flat on the marble countertop was a crisp white envelope. It had already been torn open. My name was clearly printed on the front window beside the official logo of my corporate employer. It was my quarterly bonus statement and updated salary paperwork. They had intercepted my mail, physically opened it, and read it. I froze where I stood. My chest tightened so violently that I could barely breathe. My heart began pounding with that heavy, nauseating rhythm that hits the instant you realize your most personal boundaries have been completely violated. Well, well, Marcus, my dad said, leaning back on his stool, his eyes gleaming with greedy satisfaction. You certainly didn't bother telling us you were making that kind of money now. I looked at him. Then I looked down at the ripped open envelope. Then I looked back at him. My mind was completely blank with fury. Seeing as your financial situation has improved so dramatically, my dad continued, folding his arms, maybe it's time you started paying a much higher, fairer share of the rent around here. We're all struggling to keep this house afloat, you know. I slowly turned my eyes toward my mother. You opened my private, federally protected mail. She had the absolute audacity to simply shrug. Oh, calm down. It came to our house address. It had our last name on it. We were just curious. Yeah, bro, relax, Liam chimed in with a scoff. It's not like we hacked into your bank account and stole the money. Stop being so dramatic. You crossed a massive line, I said, my voice dropping into a terrifyingly quiet, steady tone. Oh, stop with the dramatic victim routine, my dad snapped, his fake friendliness disappearing instantly. We have housed you, fed you, and supported you your entire life. You think you can just live under my roof and keep financial secrets from us now? I slowly took a step backward. My fists were clenched so tightly that my knuckles had turned bone white. But I wasn't trembling with anger. I was filled with something far deeper. Something completely final. This was the point of no return. They had deliberately invaded my privacy, mocked my professional success, and were now openly using it as leverage to demand even more money from me. That was the exact moment the master plan became completely solid in my mind. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to take every ounce of comfort, convenience, and financial stability I had been providing them, and I was going to pull it out from under them like a magician, yanking away a tablecloth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply unclenched my fists, gave a slow, deliberate nod, and said, "Okay." They all fell silent and stared at me, visibly confused by my complete lack of resistance. What exactly does "okay" mean? My mom asked, her smug smile beginning to fade. It means you're absolutely right, I said quietly as I stepped backward toward the basement door. I shouldn't keep any more secrets from you. Then I turned around and walked downstairs. What I didn't tell them was that I had already found a beautiful, quiet apartment. I didn't tell them that I had electronically signed the lease earlier that very morning. And I didn't tell them that in exactly 3 days, I was moving out for good, taking every single digital and financial thread I owned with me. When the utilities started bouncing, when the refrigerator emptied out, and when their beloved Amazon Prime deliveries suddenly stopped, they would finally understand exactly what my silence had meant. But I wasn't finished yet, because there was one final devastating piece of the puzzle I intended to uncover before I disappeared. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. I lay flat on my back on my miserable basement mattress, still fully dressed, staring blankly at the exposed pipes running across the ceiling. The dull, steady hum of my server fan was the only sound filling the room. My mind was caught in an endless loop, replaying my dad's greedy smirk, Liam's mocking laughter, and the image of my torn open mail lying on the kitchen counter like a worthless communal item. There was an overwhelming weight in my chest. It wasn't sadness, it was an ancient, bone-deep exhaustion. For nearly 3 decades I had spent my life making myself smaller to keep the peace, serving as the family's designated emotional sponge and financial safety net. They had chipped away at my spirit piece by piece until almost nothing remained, and now they wanted to consume whatever was left. I had exactly 3 days to complete my escape. The apartment I had rented was a modest one-bedroom unit on the second floor at the far edge of the city. It wasn't some luxury penthouse, but it had large windows, spotless hardwood floors, and, most importantly, a solid lock on the front door that only I had the key to. No more damp concrete walls. No more passive-aggressive stomping overhead. No more mandatory family dinners designed to tear me down. But I couldn't simply pack my belongings and walk out the front door. If they sensed even the slightest sign that I was leaving, they would do everything they could to sabotage it. They would suddenly invent major household emergencies. Marcus, the garage door is broken. You need to fix it before you go. Marcus, Mom needs you to drive her across town. Marcus, Liam needs a loan. They would do everything possible to delay me, drain me, and trap me in my role as the family's useful idiot, so I moved like a ghost. Early Friday morning, while everyone else was still asleep, I completed the utility purge. I scheduled the high-speed fiber internet to shut off completely at exactly 8 a.m. on Monday. I permanently canceled every streaming subscription: Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, Spotify, and HBO Max. Then I went into every account's settings and clicked Sign out of all devices. They wouldn't realize anything had happened until they tried to stream a movie on Sunday night and ran headfirst into a massive paywall. I completely removed the auto-pay authorizations from the home's electricity, water, and natural gas accounts. I redirected my Amazon Prime account so all future deliveries would default to a secure locker near my new apartment. I even contacted the post office and submitted a formal change of address request so every piece of my mail would be forwarded, ensuring nothing would ever end up in their greedy hands again. On Saturday, the physical move began. I packed my belongings carefully, moving everything out in small, nearly invisible stages. A few textbooks here, a stack of winter clothes there. My expensive external hard drive slipped quietly into my laptop bag. I carefully took apart my secondary monitors and boxed them up, leaving only my primary screen connected so my workspace still looked completely normal. Each time I carried another load of boxes to my car, I parked 2 blocks away and slipped through the neighborhood like a burglar escaping from my own prison. Then Sunday morning arrived. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. The house was completely silent. I carried the last of my belongings upstairs: my remaining clothes, my bathroom supplies, and my meal prep containers. The final item I picked up from my basement desk was a small, inexpensive wooden photo frame. Inside was a picture from my high school graduation. In the photo, my smile looked crooked and uncertain, while my parents stood directly behind me with their hands resting heavily on my shoulders. When I was younger, I believed that touch represented parental support. Looking at it now, in the cold light of dawn, it looked exactly like they were physically holding me in place, keeping me from moving forward. I removed the photograph from the frame, dropped it into the metal trash can, and left the empty frame lying face down on the desk. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove away. The drive to my new apartment took exactly 22 minutes, but those 22 minutes felt longer, heavier, and more meaningful than the entire 28 years of my life that had led to them. Every stoplight felt like another step in a countdown. Every turn of the steering wheel carried me farther away from the toxicity. When I finally unlocked the door to my new apartment and stepped inside, the air smelled of fresh white paint, lemon cleaner, and old pine wood. The larger furniture I had ordered wasn't scheduled to arrive until Tuesday, so for the first 2 days, it was just me, a stack of cardboard boxes, and the premium air mattress I had bought. But the silence. The silence was absolutely intoxicating. It wasn't the hostile, suffocating kind of silence from my parents' house, where every quiet moment felt like you were waiting for the next screaming match to erupt. It was a deep, peaceful, golden silence. I could hear the faint sounds of distant city traffic. I could hear a dog barking happily somewhere in the courtyard below. I sat cross-legged on the bare hardwood floor for hours, my laptop resting on my knees, simply watching the afternoon sunlight slowly stretch across the living room wall. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel small. But the inevitable storm was already brewing. Update 2. The chaos erupted exactly as scheduled on Monday morning. They didn't fully realize I was truly gone until the essential services began falling apart around them. The flood of text messages started arriving on my phone at exactly 8:15 a.m. First came my mother. "Mom, Marcus, the internet is completely down. Chloe needs to log into her college portal for a midterm. Can you restart the basement router? Mom, Marcus, are you awake? The power in the kitchen just flickered, and now the fridge is beeping. Did you forget to pay the bill? Mom, Marcus, we are literally sitting here in the dark right now. Answer your phone." I simply swiped the notifications away while sipping hot coffee in my sunlit kitchen. Then Liam's messages started pouring in. Liam, bro, what the hell did you do to the Wi-Fi? I'm in the middle of a ranked match. Liam, hello? Are you even downstairs? Mom is freaking out. Liam, did you seriously change the Netflix password? You're being incredibly petty. I remained completely silent. By Tuesday afternoon, panic had fully taken hold. I woke up to 14 missed calls and one long rambling voicemail from my dad. When I pressed play, his voice sounded completely different. The loud, overbearing authority he always carried was gone, replaced by frantic, breathless uncertainty. Marcus, listen to me. We need to talk immediately. Things have gotten incredibly complicated here. The utility companies are saying the accounts were closed. There's been some sort of massive misunderstanding. You can't just cut off the entire house like this. That is not how a family operates. Call me back the second you get this message. I sat at my new desk and let out a dark, hollow laugh. That is not how a family operates. The irony was almost unbearable. That was exactly how they had treated me my entire life, using me, draining me, and treating me like a disposable resource. Yet the moment I reflected that same energy back at them and cut off their supply, it suddenly became some unforgivable crime against the idea of family. 2 full weeks passed. I ignored every call, every text, and every manipulative email they sent. Instead, I focused completely on my new life. I decorated my apartment. I bought a real, comfortable bed. I poured myself into my IT job, optimizing server architectures and closing support tickets at a record pace. My department manager even scheduled a one-on-one meeting just to tell me how impressed he was with the sudden jump in my productivity. He offered me a position on the senior infrastructure team, along with a substantial 20% salary increase. I was thriving. The miserable, worn-down version of Marcus, who had lived in a damp basement, begging for scraps of parental affection, no longer existed. But just when I thought I had quietly ridden off into the sunset, the universe decided to drop a nuclear bomb into my lap. It happened on a quiet Thursday night. I was casually transferring old digital files from my personal cloud storage onto a new encrypted drive. Out of simple curiosity, I logged into an old secondary email account I hadn't used in almost 3 years, the one I had kept for junk mail and old college applications. As the inbox slowly loaded, my eyes locked onto an email thread near the top, marked with a bright red urgency flag. It was from a company called Apex Financial Recovery. The subject line read, "Final Notice. Intent to litigate. Joint account ending in 449. My blood instantly turned to ice. I didn't recognize the account number. I didn't recognize the collection agency. I immediately clicked the email, my heart pounding against my ribs, and downloaded the attached PDF statement. There it was, printed in stark black and white legal text. A revolving home improvement line of credit. The outstanding balance was a staggering $8,240.60, and right there, listed as the primary cosigner, were my full legal name, my date of birth, and my social security number. The secondary account holder was my father. I sat frozen in my ergonomic desk chair, the soft blue glow of my dual monitors washing across my face as pure, unfiltered shock transformed into blinding rage. Suddenly, every confusing piece of the puzzle slammed into place. I forced myself to think back 3 years. I was 25 years old, working brutal night shifts and living in a constant state of exhaustion. One morning, my dad had casually approached me in the kitchen and slid a stack of dense, legal-looking paperwork across the island. He told me it was nothing more than a standard municipal form requiring my signature to approve some minor exterior renovations to the house, explaining that the city needed every adult resident to sign it. I was naive, sleep-deprived, and desperate to keep the peace, so I blindly signed exactly where he pointed. He hadn't been getting a permit. He had secretly tied my pristine credit profile to a massive high-interest line of credit. He had immediately maxed it out, most likely to fund their lavish lifestyle, and had stopped making even the minimum payments more than 8 months earlier. The collection agency had been relentlessly sending emails to that old inbox because I had long since updated my primary contact information. This was the real reason he completely lost his mind when I moved out. It wasn't about the $500 basement rent. It wasn't about the grocery money. It was about losing physical access to the human shield he had illegally attached to his disastrous financial mess. He had quietly built a massive debt bomb, strapped it to my back, and smiled at me while doing it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my keyboard. I didn't call him in tears demanding answers. The old Marcus would have done that. The new Marcus was a highly trained systems administrator who specialized in breaking down complex problems and systematically eliminating threats. I got to work immediately. Step 1. I pulled my complete 3-bureau credit report. There it was, a massive red stain dragging my excellent credit score into the ground. A severely delinquent account with an outstanding balance of $8,240.60. Step 2. I picked up my phone and called Maya, a friend from my old warehouse days who had since graduated from law school and now worked in consumer advocacy and financial litigation. I calmly explained the entire situation and securely sent her the PDF documents. Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, this is textbook financial abuse," she said, her voice completely serious. "It happens all the time in toxic families. Is it technically illegal? It's a huge gray area because your physical signature is on the documents, even if it was obtained under completely false pretenses. But here's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to file a comprehensive fraud dispute with all 3 credit bureaus. We're going to place a hard security freeze on your entire identity. And we're going to force the original creditor to launch a full internal investigation into how this debt originated." "Will that affect him?" I asked, my voice frighteningly calm. "Oh, absolutely," Maya replied, with a hint of grim satisfaction in her tone. "If you formally dispute your liability and flag the account as deceptive, the creditor will immediately shift the legal and financial burden onto the secondary account holder, your father. They'll freeze his remaining assets, destroy his personal credit score, and pursue him immediately for the full balance." "Good," I whispered. "Let's burn it down." Over the next 48 hours, I assembled a devastating collection of evidence. I gathered every bank statement proving I had never received or benefited from a single dollar of that $8,000 line of credit. I drafted a sworn notarized affidavit stating that I had been intentionally misled about the true nature of the financial documents I signed. Then I submitted the entire package to the credit bureaus and the collection agency through certified mail. But I realized I still wasn't finished. If we were playing scorched earth, I was going to salt the fields. I logged into the tax preparation software I had generously used to help Liam file his taxes 2 years earlier. My email address was still listed as the master recovery account. I could see that he had an unfinished draft tax return sitting in the system for the previous tax year. He hadn't reported the substantial cash tips he earned while bartending. He had spent months bragging about avoiding taxes. I didn't hack into his account. I simply used the public anonymous IRS tip line to submit a detailed report about a specific bartender failing to report substantial cash income from his former place of employment. I let the federal government deal with the golden boy. After that, I meticulously removed myself from every remaining emergency contact list, medical portal, and school registry connected to my family. I had become a ghost. The inevitable face-to-face confrontation happened exactly 2 weeks later. I was walking back to my apartment building on a Friday evening, carrying 2 heavy bags of groceries. As I reached the front steps, a silver SUV suddenly swerved hard toward the curb. The door flew open. My dad stepped out. He looked terrible. His face was pale. His eyes were bloodshot. The arrogant, untouchable confidence he usually carried had completely fallen apart. "Marcus," he barked, striding toward me, although his voice no longer carried its usual booming authority. "We need to talk right now." I stopped on the concrete steps and set my grocery bags on the ground. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at him with cold, unwavering indifference. "You think you can just play these sick little games?" he demanded, pointing a trembling finger at my chest. "I just got a certified letter from the bank. They froze my checking account. They're demanding the entire $8,000 immediately. What the hell did you tell them?" "I told them the exact truth," I replied, my voice perfectly steady. "I told them I was fraudulently misled into co-signing a massive line of credit that I never received any benefit from. We are your family," he screamed, his face turning purple as spit flew from his mouth. "You don't sick the damn credit bureaus on your own father? I put a roof over your head. You wouldn't have survived without me." "No," I said, taking one slow, deliberate step down the stairs, forcing him to step backward. "You wouldn't have survived the last 3 years without me. You used my name, my credit, and my paycheck to fund your pathetic, fake wealthy lifestyle. And the moment I stopped bleeding myself dry for you, you panicked. His jaw dropped. He genuinely had no response. For the first time in 28 years, the great, intimidating patriarch stood completely speechless. "Do not ever come to my home again," I said quietly. "If you do, I will call the police, and I will hand them the rest of the documentation I have regarding your financial activities." I picked up my groceries, walked up the stairs, went inside, and locked a heavy deadbolt behind me. I never looked back. A month later, the final decision arrived in my mailbox. The credit bureaus had fully ruled in my favor. The fraudulent account was permanently removed from my credit report. My credit score shot back into the high 700s, and the entire $1,840.60 debt, along with the substantial penalty fees, was legally assigned exclusively to my father's name. As one final act of closure, I logged into the old shared Google Drive folder I had once managed for the family. I deleted every photo, every tax document, and every recipe. Then I created one master folder titled Contributens. Inside, I uploaded hundreds of PDF files, every grocery receipt I had ever paid for, every Venmo transfer I had sent, every $500 rent receipt, and finally, a screenshot of the official credit dispute resolution that completely cleared me of his secret debt. I left behind one final text document. It read, "I used to think love was something I had to keep purchasing from you. I now realize you were simply bankrupt, and I am done paying your debts. This is everything I sacrifice for this family. Do not ever contact me again." I removed myself as the owner, transferred access to his email, and permanently deleted the account from all of my devices. It has now been a year and a half since that day. I am now a senior systems engineer. I bought a beautiful new car, no rust, no rattling. I spend my weekends hiking, traveling, and hosting game nights with friends who genuinely value my presence instead of my wallet. Last week, a distant relative accidentally forwarded me a digital photo. It was from Liam's recent, surprisingly modest courthouse wedding. In the picture, my dad looked 10 years older, hollowed out, and exhausted. My mom looked miserable. Liam and Chloe were both staring down at their phones. They were standing together in the same photograph, yet they looked like four complete strangers who had been forced into the same room. I stared at the picture for a long time. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I only felt a deep, overwhelming sense of peace. They had built their entire kingdom on control, manipulation, and my stolen money. The moment I walked away and closed the door behind me, the entire castle collapsed into dust. Top comments. User 1. The absolute audacity of your dad to pull the "you'd be homeless without us" card while secretly using your stolen identity to prop up his own fake lifestyle is genuinely sickening. You didn't just burn the bridge, you nuked it from orbit. Incredible execution on the credit dispute. User 2. IT guy here. The way you systematically shut down every digital tether, the Wi-Fi, Netflix, Amazon Prime was pure poetry. They thought you were nothing more than a human ATM. Reporting the golden child brother to the IRS for tax evasion was the cherry on top of this incredible revenge story. Enjoy your peace. User 3. It is unbelievable how toxic parents will drain their most responsible child dry, coddle the useless ones, and then act completely shocked when the responsible one finally reaches their breaking point and leaves. Good for you for protecting your credit and your future. Never look back.